The kitchen's that way, sweetheart. That job suits you better.
I've held a beating heart in these hands. Have you?
You don't belong on this case, Doctor. Step aside now.
He's alive because I refuse to. I'm staying right here. Your father stole my father's name from this record.
That was 30 years ago. It doesn't matter now.
6 hours. That is all the time Kang Joon-Ho had left to laugh. At exactly 7:12 p.m., under crystal chandeliers 30 floors above Empire City, the youngest CEO in Kang Global Group's history looked a trauma surgeon in the eye and told her she did not belong in the room. He did not know her name yet. He did not know she would be the only person standing over him when his heart stopped beating. He only saw a woman in a plain black dress, holding a glass of water instead of champagne, and in half a second, he decided exactly who she was. Outside the windows, Empire City glittered like it always did, indifferent to the small cruelty happening 30 floors above it. Somewhere below, an ambulance was already being fueled for a call no one had made yet. He was wrong about her. And in 6 hours this entire city would watch him find that out. Before we go further, hit subscribe and tap like, because you will not believe what happens to Joon-Ho in 6 hours. Comment where you're watching from tonight. Her name was Zora Bennett, 31 years old, senior trauma surgeon at Empire General Hospital, standing in that ballroom as an honored guest, not as decoration. She had come straight from a 16-hour shift. Her dress was simple. Her shoes were flat, because she had learned years ago that comfort mattered more than approval. She was talking quietly with one of the hospital's biggest donors about the new trauma wing, when Joon-Ho's voice cut across the room. "A trauma surgeon," he said, not quite hiding his smile, in a dress from last season, holding water like she is afraid of her own reflection in a champagne glass. He tilted his head. "Sweetheart, the kitchen is that way. That job fits you better than the one you are pretending to have." The room laughed. Not everyone, but enough. Zora did not flinch. She set her glass down slowly, met his eyes, and let her voice carry to every corner of that ballroom. "I have held a human heart in my bare hands, Mr. Kang. I am not afraid of a room full of people who have never held anything heavier than a wine glass." The laughter stopped. Somewhere behind him, a donor cleared his throat and looked away. As Joon-Ho turned, his sleeve pulled back, and Zora caught 1 second of silver on his wrist. An old watch, worn smooth at the edges, engraved strangely out of place on a man who wore nothing that was not brand new that season. Something about it made her chest go tight. She did not know why. Not yet. She left before dessert was served. At home, in a small apartment that still smelled faintly of her father's old books, Zora pulled a battered cigar box down from the closet shelf. She had not opened it in over a year. Inside was a stethoscope with a cracked tube, a folded letter she had never finished reading, and one photograph torn cleanly in half. In the photograph, a young black man in a white coat stood beside another young man she did not recognize, both of them laughing outside a hospital that no longer existed under that name. Her father, Dr. Robert Bennett, 30 years younger than she had ever known him. She had asked him once who the other man was. He had only smiled and said, "Someone I owed everything to and someone who owed me the same." He died before he ever explained it, and the second half of that photograph had never turned up in any of his things. She sat with the torn photograph a long time that night, tracing the edge where it had been ripped, thinking about a silver watch on a stranger's wrist, and wondering why some small stubborn part of her felt certain she had seen it before. By morning the video was everywhere. Someone at the gala had filmed the whole exchange on a phone held low, and by 9 a.m., it had a headline: "Korean billionaire humiliates black surgeon at his own charity gala." By noon, Kang Global Group stock had dipped nearly 2 points, and the hospital board that was supposed to finalize the new trauma wing funding that same week suddenly had a list of questions no one wanted to answer. In a glass office 40 floors up, Victor Kang, Joon-Ho's cousin and chief operating officer, watched the numbers fall with something close to satisfaction. "The board is nervous," he told Joon-Ho, sliding a printout across the desk. "A CEO who cannot control his temper in public cannot be trusted to control a company. Maybe it is time we talked quietly about succession." Joon-Ho said nothing. But his jaw tightened and Victor noticed. At Empire General, Dr. Naomi Reyes, chief of surgery and the closest thing Zora had to family in this city, closed her office door before she spoke. Kang Foundation funds 40% of this wing, she said quietly. If they pull that funding over this, it will not touch him. It will touch you and everyone on your team. 2 people, 2 very different kinds of pressure, and 1 video spreading a little wider by the hour. 2 days later, Joon-Ho walked into Empire General with his publicist trailing behind him and a single white rose in his hand, a gesture someone on his PR team had insisted would photograph well. Zora found him standing awkwardly in the hallway outside the trauma unit, rose in hand, cameras nowhere in sight because she had made certain of that first. "I am here to apologize," he said. "No," she said. "You are here because your stock dropped. There is a difference and we both know it." He opened his mouth then closed it again. "You did not laugh at my job, Mr. Kang," she said, quiet and steady. "You laughed because a woman in that room did not fit into a box you had already built for her, and it made you uncomfortable that you could not control it. This was never about a dress. It was about you needing everyone in that room to already know their place before you even walked in." For the first time since she had met him, Joon-Ho looked like a man with no ready answer. He set the rose down on a chair in the hallway. "You're right," he said quietly. "I don't fully know why I said what I said." He left without giving the apology he had come to give, because the only honest thing he had to offer her that day was silence. Something is about to change everything for both of them. Subscribe, hit like, and tell me, have you ever been underestimated the way Zora was? 3 nights later, in a boardroom on the 40th floor, Victor made his move. A formal vote, he told the assembled board, on whether Joon-Ho should remain CEO through this funding crisis. His voice stayed calm. His eyes did not. Joon-Ho stood to answer him, and the room tilted sideways. Later, no one could agree on exactly what happened first, whether he reached for the table or the table seemed to reach for him. What everyone agreed on was the sound he made hitting the floor, the silence that followed it, and the fact that within 4 minutes an ambulance was already screaming toward Kang Tower with its lights cutting through the dark. At Empire General, a trauma pager buzzed at 11:47 p.m. 41-year-old male, cardiac arrest, undiagnosed structural defect, incoming in 6 minutes, the voice on the radio said. Family name is Kang. Dr. Naomi Reyes looked up sharply from the chart in her hands. Who's on call tonight? The answer was already written on the board in dry erase marker, plain and impossible to miss. Zora Bennett. The woman he had laughed at in a ballroom 5 days earlier was about to be the only person standing between Kang Joon-Ho and the end of his life. The operating room did not care who he was outside its doors. Inside there was no CEO, no Kang Global Group, no ballroom, no cameras, no watch on a wrist that meant anything to anyone in that room. There was only a chest that needed to be opened, a heart that needed to be held steady, and a surgeon whose hands did not shake. Retractor, Zora said, and it was placed in her palm before she finished the word. Suction. Done. I need him stable in the next 90 seconds or we lose him. No one argued. No one laughed at anything she said now. Every single person in that room moved because her voice told them to, and her voice alone. Victor arrived at the hospital 40 minutes later, already talking to the hospital administrator about conflict of interest and optics, gently suggesting Zora be replaced by someone with less personal history with the family. The administrator looked at him for a long, unimpressed moment. She is the best trauma surgeon in this hospital, and she is the reason he still has a pulse right now. I am not pulling her off this case to protect your headline, Mr. Kang. Victor's smile stayed fixed in place. It did not reach his eyes. Joon-Ho woke at 4 a.m. disoriented, tubes in his arm, machines humming quietly around him. Zora was there, checking his monitors herself because she always checked on her patients before the sun came up, no matter whose name was on the chart. You, he said, voice rough. You saved me. I did my job, she said simply. He was quiet for a while, watching the ceiling. Then, softer than she had ever heard him speak, he said, My sister died in a hospital when I was 22. My family was told it was a doctor's mistake. I have not fully trusted anyone in scrubs since that day. I think some part of me saw your dress and your quiet voice at that gala and decided you were the kind of unqualified person who took her from us. I was wrong about you before I ever really met you. Zora sat down slowly in the chair beside his bed. My father was a surgeon too, she said. He died before I finished my training. I have spent every day since trying to be good enough that no one could ever laugh at me the way you did. She paused. So I understand grief making people cruel. I do not excuse it, but I understand it. For a moment, neither of them said anything else. It did not need more words. The peace did not last long. 3 days later, a formal complaint landed on the hospital board's desk, alleging that Zora had used undue influence to remain on a high-profile patient's case for personal gain, jeopardizing her nomination to become the youngest attending surgeon in the hospital's history. Dr. Reyes traced the complaint back within the hour. It had come from an anonymous account, but the filing metadata pointed to a law firm on retainer with exactly one client anywhere in Empire City. Kang Global Group. Victor is trying to bury you before you're even promoted, Reyes said, sliding her laptop screen toward her. If this reaches the full board, it will not matter that it's false. It will only matter that it's public, and public is all Victor needs. Zora stared at the screen for a long moment, jaw tight. Then she thought of the silver watch, the torn photograph still sitting on her kitchen table, and her father's voice saying someone I owed everything to. Something in her finally decided it was time to stop wondering quietly and start asking loudly. The truth is about to break wide open. Subscribe, hit like, and comment now because you will not believe what happens next. That night, Zora went back to the hospital archive with the torn photograph folded in her coat pocket. 2 hours in, buried in a box marked for shredding, she found it. A donor ledger from 34 years ago, water-damaged but legible. A car accident on Founders Bridge, a critical patient brought in unconscious, and the surgeon of record who had refused to let him die on that table. Dr. Robert Bennett. The patient's name, typed in fading ink, was Kang Joon-Ho's father. Clipped to the file was a letter of gratitude from the Kang family, along with a note that a silver pocket watch, engraved with the words "for the hands that saved my son," had been gifted to Dr. Bennett in thanks that same year. The same watch, the one on Joon-Ho's wrist tonight, passed down to him without anyone ever telling him where it had truly begun. But there was a second letter in the file, filed almost exactly a year later by a different Kang family member, formally requesting the hospital records credit the save instead to the attending physician of record, a young resident named Sang-hoon Kang, Victor's own father. Erasing Dr. Bennett's name from Kang Foundation history, quietly and completely, Zora sat in that archive room with 34 years of buried truth sitting heavy in her lap. Her father had saved this family, and someone had spent 3 decades making absolutely certain no one ever knew it. That was the secret Victor had been protecting all along. Not just a scandal waiting to happen. A lie his own father had built the entire family legacy on top of. The next board meeting was standing room only. Zora walked in with Dr. Reyes beside her, the original ledger in one hand and the torn photograph in the other. She did not raise her voice once. 34 years ago, my father saved the life of Kang Sung-min, she said, and set the ledger down on the long table. Someone erased his name from this hospital's record and gave the credit to Sang-hoon Kang, who was not even the surgeon present that night. She looked directly at Victor across the room. Your father built your family's story about medicine, gratitude, and honor on top of a stolen record. And when I got close to that truth by accident, you tried to bury me instead of finally burying his lie. The room went completely silent. Joon-Ho, still pale from surgery, rose slowly to his feet. Is this true? He asked Victor, and it was not really a question anymore. Victor did not answer. His face had already answered for him. Within the week, the board removed Victor from Kang Global Group entirely, and the name Dr. Robert Bennett was placed back into the family's record, exactly where it had always belonged. 6 months later, Empire General unveiled a new wing. The plaque outside read, "The Robert Bennett Trauma Center, founded in gratitude, continued in excellence." Joon-Ho had insisted on funding it in full, and insisted just as firmly that his own family name stay off that particular wall. "This was never mine to take credit for," he told Zora the morning of the ceremony. "It was always yours." I am just glad I finally understand that, even if it took almost losing my life to see it clearly. He did not chase her after that day. He did not send flowers or make grand declarations in front of cameras. He simply showed up week after week at the hospital fundraisers, at the quiet coffee stand near the surgical wing, at the small, unglamorous places where trust is actually built instead of announced. He let her set the pace every single time. It was 3 months after the ceremony, on an ordinary Tuesday evening, when Zora finally reached for his hand outside the hospital doors, in the same daylight where the whole story had first begun, though neither of them mentioned that ballroom anymore. "You waited," she said. "You were worth waiting for," he said. Even when I was too proud to see it clearly. She let herself smile fully, for the first time around him without guarding it. We are almost at the moment this whole story has been building toward. Subscribe, like, and comment below because justice like this deserves to be seen and remembered. Here is what this story leaves behind. Respect is not something you can read off a dress, a job title, or the way someone walks into a room. The hands that end up saving you rarely look the way pride expects them to look. Zora Bennett was never beneath that ballroom. She was the reason anyone inside it was still breathing by the time this story ended, and she never once needed his permission to know her own worth. Sometimes the truth waits 34 years in a torn photograph, and sometimes it only takes one person brave enough to finally open the box. If this story moved you even a little, you are exactly who this channel was made for. This has been Empire City Romance Stories, where quiet strength always wins in the end. Subscribe so you never miss the next one, tap that like button and turn on notifications. Tell me in the comments. Have you ever been underestimated by someone who owed you better? I read every single one. See you in the next story.